Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading my analysis of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius Antonius, translated by George Long. I call this analysis Death Wish. Let's begin, shall we? This is an interpretation analysis of the 12 Meditations of Marcus Aurelius by Jimmy. Hopefully you've been reading with Jimmy, all 12. It was an exciting experience for me, and I hope it was for you. There are many excellent interpretations of the meditations, as AI will tell you these days. For example, when you Google interpretations, some of the best interpretations are by George Hayes, George Long, Robert Waterfield. Now, the minute you see George Long, you realize that AI, despite its benefits, is not always correct because these are mostly translators. These are translators, right? Not interpretation, although George gives you enough notes in his translation, as we read together, to help us understand that. In fact, George also wrote 50 pages in his translation in front of the Meditations that he calls The Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius Antonius. Now, you have to buy the book in order to read his 50 pages, but I'm going to highlight some of the things because he wants you to understand Marcus's philosophy. He wrote, quote, the Emperor Antonius, and you notice even in the footnotes when George Long talks about Marcus Aurelius, he calls him Antonius, or he calls him the Emperor, was a practical moralist. From his youth, he followed a laborious discipline, and though his high station placed him above all want or fear of it, he lived as frugally and temperately as the poorest philosopher. I don't know how he knows this. I don't know how he knows what he wrote, except by reading other people and what they wrote by reading other people. And one of the things I taught you as you read with Jimmy is to really go to the source. Always read the source document. We want the source. So I don't know how he knows how Marcus lived, and calling him a practical moralist is kind of interesting, but again, I don't know what George means. Now, is there a lot of morality in what we read in the 12 Meditations? Perhaps. Perhaps not. It depends on how you interpret the word morality, right? But we're going to talk about that throughout this analysis. A moralist is someone who has strong opinions about right and wrong. And I think just by that definition, we can agree that Marcus Aurelius is, in fact, a moralist. But anyone who has strong opinions about right and wrong, including you, well, Jimmy, I don't have any strong opinions. Well, then you're not a moralist. But if you do, then you're a moralist, right? And who tries to influence the behavior of others to match their own belief. Did Marcus Aurelius try to do that? Was he doing that when he was writing his Meditations? Or was he writing it to himself to remind himself how to be good, what is virtue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Well, those are questions you have to decide. Respectfully, he probably didn't write these to influence others. He wrote them to influence himself. But in any case, did you get the idea that Marcus, in reading Meditations, did you get that idea? Now, George, by adding the adjective practical, confused me. Practical means, quote, of or concerned with the actual doing or use of something rather than with the theory and ideas. If you read what I read when we were reading the 12 Meditations, Marcus does a lot of theory and ideas, doesn't he? If you doubt that, go back and reread. Pick a random meditation and read about it, and you'll see that most of what he's talking about here is theoretical and it's ideas. It's not an action story. These are thoughts, right? Meditations is all about ideas, and it's supposed to document his actions, like killing barbarians, right? He doesn't anywhere say, I killed 50 barbarians today. He just talks about ideas and how to live. And remember, when we read, we want to read on how other people lead their lives and how to lead our own. So I don't know what George means by it. Let's go back here. His station as the emperor put him above all want or fear of it. What is it? It is a pronoun, but when you read this sentence, what does it refer to? What is the noun that's replaced by the pronoun it? The Emperor Antonius was a practical moralist, period. From his youth, he followed laborious discipline, and though his high station placed him above all want or fear of it. Is this it? Laborious discipline? I don't know. I don't think Marcus was afraid of it. Do you? Anyway. So I don't know what he means, which is a problem with pronouns. So be careful how you use pronouns. George further wrote, quote, there is much in Antonius that is hard to understand. And it might be said that he did not fully comprehend all that he wrote, which would, however, be in no way remarkable, for it happens now that a man may write what neither he nor anybody can understand. Huh? That's an interesting statement. I have no idea what George is talking about. If you read this statement again, how can anyone write that they don't understand? How can anyone write what they don't understand? How do you do that? Did George mean that Marcus is writing to help him understand himself? I believe that firmly. In fact, I believe the 12 meditations were written by Marcus to Marcus. Every night after the battle, he would go in and write these meditations, trying to explain to himself what he should and should not be doing as he lived his life. And while it's true, Marcus is at times hard to understand, I think we will agree on that after reading the meditations. It's not impossible to understand him. It's not impossible to understand the meditations. You just have to think about it, which is what this analysis is going to try to make you do. It's going to try to make you think. Much of the 50 pages in George's analysis of Marcus' philosophy contains extensive quotations from the meditations themselves. And George uses these quotations to prove his points that he's trying to make, which is what you should do. If you're trying to make a point about how Marcus Aurelius was thinking, you have to draw from the meditations themselves, which we're going to do, by the way, which we've done in every analysis. Whenever Jimmy analyzes a book, a chapter, whatever, he's always going to the source material to prove his point, which is what you should do. George's footnotes also help us understand Marcus. But let's not forget what the meditations really are. They're a journal of thought to Marcus from Marcus. And that's what a diary is for. Someone asked me the other day, or said to me, writing is therapeutic, don't you think? That was his question to me. Writing is not only therapeutic, it's much more than therapy. It's really a chance to clarify how you think about what you think about. And Jimmy highly recommends keeping a journal, which he has kept for a long time, since he was 17, although he destroyed some of them in a fit of rage when he was losing his temper. We're not saints. All right. What thinking is a meditation. So what do you think? What do you think about? What do you think about? Or don't you think? How do you think about what you think about? Do you think random thoughts? Do you try to think logically? Don't you care about logic? This book actually shows us how someone, one of the emperors of Rome, thought about himself and the things around him. Ladies and gentlemen, the meditations, it is a gift. Why? Well, because he's actually trying to sort things out for himself perhaps the same way we try or should try to sort things out for ourselves, only we get to peek into his mind as he's doing this. And you can agree or not agree with what he's saying. In fact, if you agree or don't agree, I would say that you are in fact reading. If you dismiss it and say, this is not important, you're going to miss a whole layer of understanding that's going to help you lead your life. My belief, and always has been, read the classic for yourself. Read for yourself. That's why Jimmy reads with you before he analyzes. He wants you to absorb the nature of the language. Now, remember, this is a translation, right? This is a translation by George Long from the Greek, because Marcus wrote in Greek. Well, how do you know that, Jimmy? Because I believed what somebody wrote about it, because I saw it in more than one place. So my conclusion was, okay, I believe he wrote in Greek. Well, what if I prove to you he didn't write in Greek? Well, that's fine, but somebody wrote this damn stuff, right? So whether or not you believe it, George translated it. And I'm not scholarly enough to go and look up for the original source document in Greek, because I can't read Greek. So we are eternally grateful to George Long and the other translators. But as I told you when I picked this translation, the translator has a lot to do with the integrity, the rhythm, the intent of the writer. So you really try to find a good translator of the original. That's why you see a lot of these and thous, because George is trying to translate the way he believed that was being written in Greek, right? And you have to erase your blackboard. In other words, you can't come in with any preconceived notion like, for example, if you don't believe virtue is the key to life, then, well, I don't believe that. Well, you got to erase that belief temporarily because Marcus believed that. And if you're going to understand him, you have to try to understand what he believed and then why he believed it, because he tells us why. And so you let the words you're reading penetrate your thinking. You don't color the words with your own beliefs and disbeliefs. For example, I talked to several people who are atheists. And when Marcus talks about the gods, Romans had multiple gods. In the Meditations, which we're going to cover in my analysis, he also uses the singular God with a capital G. He also uses the word providence with a capital P. And they kind of mean the same thing. They mean a deity, something above us, outside of ourselves, something outside of ourselves, greater than ourselves. Well, and if you don't believe that, that's okay. But if you're going to understand this guy, you got to try to put yourself into his mind, which the Meditations does. And then you reread them and you think about them. And it's difficult to do in the day-to-day, while you can get help from others in understanding, like what I'm trying to do. The best judge of a classic is and always will be eventually you, and you alone. You understand? Don't forget to email me, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, if you have questions. You are the best person to judge Marcus whether he knew what he was writing or not, and if that advice is something you can use. Jimmy's interpretation, what we're reading now, is simply an overview of Marcus's belief system, his philosophy, based in his own words, on his own words. Well, Jimmy, I don't have a philosophy. Well, sure you do. You are leading your life, whether you believe you have a philosophy or not. You are leading your life according to certain rules, right, that you believe to be true. Well, Jimmy, I don't think much about that. Well, that's okay. You're still leading your life according to certain rules. Well, Jimmy, I don't like to work. That's why I don't go to work. Well, there you go. That's your philosophy. You don't like to work. Well, Jimmy, I work too much. My wife tells me I work too much. Well, there you go. You see, you may not know it, but everyone has a philosophy that they follow. And what Marcus did is he put it down in writing, and that's his gift to us. It should give us pause to think about our own lives in relationship to what he discusses. After all, we read to learn how other how others lead their life and how we should lead ours. So, for example, in Meditation 9, number 4, Marcus writes, "He who does wrong against himself. He who acts unjustly to himself, because he makes himself bad." Do you believe that? Do you believe what I just read? That's what he wrote. He's basically saying if you do wrong to someone, you really wrong yourself. And if you act unjustly to someone, you act unjustly to yourself, because then you become bad. So right there, we can understand what George Long wrote, that he's a practical moralist. I don't know if he's a moralist, because I don't know that he's writing this to convince other people what he just wrote is true. I think he's writing this to remind himself as the emperor what he should do as the emperor. In other words, be just. Don't do wrong. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you don't believe that, none of the rest of the meditations would make any sense to you. So put aside your own belief. If you think you're always doing just and always doing good, that's great. Congratulations, you're a saint. Personally, I don't believe that, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. But if you don't believe that, what do you believe? If you don't believe Marcus when he wrote that, what do you believe when you do wrong? When you do wrong, when you act unjustly, when you hurt someone, do you believe that you hurt yourself, or do you believe that you hurt the other person? Because if you do believe it, how do you deal with yourself when you do wrong? When you do wrong, what do you do? Do you hide it from other people? Do you go to confession if you're a Catholic and confess it and think that you're absolved? What do you do? You see what I'm saying about thinking about these things? Or Meditation 7, number 30, quote, "Direct thy attention to what is said. Let thy understanding enter into the things that are doing and the things which do them." Do you believe this? That listening is important in life? If you don't, you better believe it, because quite frankly, there's nothing more important than listening. And don't forget, why is he writing this down? He's telling himself, he's the emperor. Direct your attention to what is said. In other words, listen carefully to what is being said. You know, we all have the habit of coloring what is being said to us with our own beliefs, with our own prejudices, with our own blackboard, right? So it's very hard to be 100% pure listener, but you can be. I've told this story before in my other analysis, that you can be. It just takes discipline. You got to erase your blackboard and just listen to what's being said, like now. Some of you have already drifted off and stopped listening and turned off, the feed. You're not listening anymore, which is okay. But for those of you who are going to stick it out with me, you're going to learn something, I think, that'll help you lead your life better. Because there's a lot to learn, and we don't have the time to discuss this for hours and hours. Do you agree with Marcus, or don't you believe this? How do you manage your life? How do you manage your life? Each meditation contains numerous thoughts like this and more. So let's begin by trying to understand what most people say about Marcus Aurelius, that he was a Stoic. Okay, we've read that in George's footnotes. Some of you already emailed me and already talked about Stoicism because you looked it up online. And many times when you look about Marcus Aurelius, almost everyone says this guy was a Stoic. But I want you to put that aside for a moment. Google's AI told us that Meditations is a text to help us understand Stoicism. If you Google that, Google will tell you that Marcus Aurelius was an emperor who practiced Stoicism according to many. And before you say, wait a minute, Jimmy, didn't you tell us not to read anything outside the Meditations and just read the Meditations? Isn't tackling Stoicism, something outside the Meditations? Because reading the 12 Meditations, I don't see anywhere besides George's footnotes where Marcus Aurelius says, I am a Stoic. Do you remember that? I don't remember that. If you do, email me. Well, it is. And I'm taking you outside the Meditations for one moment for a reason. You can read the Meditations and make conclusions that will lead you to Stoicism, or you can understand a little bit about Stoicism that lead you to conclude Marcus is a Stoic. The difference is the difference between induction and deduction in your reasoning. Your reasoning, if you'll remember from the Meditations, is very, very important to Marcus Aurelius, isn't it? He says that's your central function. That's really your core. That's what makes us human, is we can reason. The reasoning faculty, that's our reason. And when you reason, when you think things through, you're doing either induction or deduction. I've always found these two words very confusing, but that's just me. I'm a slow learner. Let me try to make some sense of these two things. So that when I hear the word deduction, I always think about Sherlock Holmes. If you've seen any Sherlock Holmes or read Sherlock Holmes, elementary, my dear Watson, because he concludes, like when Watson will walk in, he'll look and he'll see feathers on his shirt or something, and he'll conclude, he'll make conclusions based on what he knows about Watson and the feather that he just saw on his cloak. So Holmes is known for deductions, which involve general rules, observations, and then you form conclusions. Holmes' deductive reasoning is based on observation and inference, and we infer things. When you read Marcus, if we go back there and we look at those two things I quoted about unjustly and justly, right? He says you hurt yourself. He's reasoning that when you hurt someone, when you do someone wrong, you wrong yourself. That's he's writing that as a kind of a observation in law. So we have to infer that from something. Does he really believe that, or is he just writing that to make himself feel good? He believes that carefully observing facts can lead to the truth, or as he says, it's elementary. So in the Meditations, deductive reasoning, we observe and infer what Marcus writes. For example, when you read about pain, there's sections in pain, many sections. We can infer that he was undergoing something painful, so he wrote about pain. That's a safe observation. Would you agree with that? If you know he was fighting barbarians, you read that someplace or whatever, maybe he was wounded. Or maybe he was just writing about pain, or someone he knew died and he was feeling pain. Or you recognize that these recurring themes suggest a worldview, his overview philosophy, that stress inner discipline. This is what I walked away with. He's a disciplined guy. He's a reasoned guy. And he accepts events beyond his control. So now we can deduce that Marcus Aurelius adhered, that sounds like a specific philosophy that values reason, self-control, acceptance of your challenges. If you look it up, you're going to find out that is Stoicism. So deduction leads us from reading what he wrote to Stoicism. Induction is the exact opposite. We start with Stoicism and then we apply it to what Marcus is saying, which is fine too. My point as Jimmy reading to you all these classical literatures, that it's nice to know Stoicism, philosophy, theology, the Bible. These are all nice things to read because they're interspersed in the classical literature. There's plenty of times when you're reading Marcus Aurelius that he talks about Zeno, Socrates, Plato. These are all people that existed before him that played an influence in his philosophy and thinking. So either way, you're reading the Meditations and staying in them is important. So knowing about Stoicism is just a benefit. So if you go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which you can find online, Stoicism was one of the dominant philosophical systems of the Hellenistic period, The name derives from the porch in the Agora of Athens, decorated with mural paintings, and it's a blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's great. The other two philosophical systems at that time were Epicureanism and skepticism. You've been accused of being skeptical? Well, skepticism existed way long before you were born. Now, you don't have to believe that, but there's a few facts you can contemplate. There are 18,722 words in this reference if you look it up online, and we're not going to worry about that. So how do we use what others have thought about Stoicism to help us understand Marcus? Well, they say he was a Stoic, so we should see if what we read reflects Stoicism, or we examine what Marcus wrote and then go backwards, induction, deduction. Either way, what is called a Stoic matches what Marcus was writing. It gives us a deeper understanding of Marcus. The Stanford's first sentence in the definition that we looked at, the Stoic school was founded by Zeno of Citium, a voracious reader of Socratic dialogues written by Plato, who also studied under the Cynic Crates and was influenced by the teaching of Plato's Academy, blah, blah, blah. Do you believe this? You don't have to. You don't have to, but if you start reading Plato and Socrates, you're going to believe it because Zeno is actually mentioned more than once in the Meditations. So in classic, that's called an allusion, right? An allusion, you allude to something written before you. And the Meditations is full of allusions because Marcus Aurelius was a well-read guy. He read a lot. He studied a lot. He was, in fact, a warrior philosopher. He was a philosopher, a thinker, but also a doer. He didn't just live in his head. So if you're going to understand what's being written, you have to accept it. This is, in fact, third-person narrator. You know the difference, right? But this is first-person narration by Marcus. But you have to believe what he's writing. Otherwise, none of this will make sense. Because you could say, well, he's lying. Well, he's not. This is like a diary. It's a personal diary. Imagine finding someone's personal diary. Wow. Wow. Marcus writes often about Plato and Socrates. He mentions Zeno. So if you're going to gain a deeper understanding of the Meditations, you should read at least Plato. We're not going to worry about that right now. George Long obviously read Plato. And he saves us some time. So if you trust George Long and he refers to Plato and he gives us footnotes about Plato, you know, time, ladies and gentlemen, is the only non-renewable resource. And that's why some of you will stop listening now and I have no further use for Jimmy. And that's fine. Some of you will realize that the time you're spending with me is not only worthwhile, it's going to save you time later on. Because remember, you're reading this stuff to find out how other people live and how to lead your own life. Look at it. No one has all the answers. If someone had all the answers, boy, would it be easy, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? So it's up to you and me to gather all the facts we can about how to lead your life. What does that mean? Well, what's life for? Why are you here? Why are you here? So you're never going to get back the moments that you spend reading with Jimmy, which is why I'm trying to help you understand and appreciate the value of classical literature like the Meditations. Because personally, I have always found classical literature worth my time. Do you realize the hours and hours and hours that I'll never get back? Well, Jimmy, you wasted your time. No, I didn't. Because I'm a happy guy. I'm telling you right now, the more you know, the further you go. Just telling you. So to understand what Marcus was writing and reading Plato will deepen our appreciation, but it's not necessary for us to analyze Meditations. In fact, George Long's translation contains lots of footnotes, blah, blah, blah. So for this analysis, let's just concentrate, can we, on what we read, what we read. And what does Marcus believe? What does he believe? What's this book? What is this book all about? As I mentioned in prior analysis, this is a diary. This is Marcus jotting down his observations, notes, thoughts. And what Jimmy believes is a document, is to document those notes, thoughts, and observations, because he is the emperor. But the real essence of meditations is the self-examination of Marcus Aurelius. In other words, introspection, examining yourself. Number 37. Enough of this wretched life and murmuring and apish tricks. Why art thou so disturbed? What is there new? What unsettles thee? Is it the form of the thing? Well, look at it. Or is it the matter? Well, look at it. But besides these, there is nothing. Towards the gods, then, now become at last more simple and better. It's the same whether we examine these things for 100 years or just 3. Who's he talking to? Right? He's talking to himself. This is introspection. He's saying enough of this, enough of this murmuring. Quit complaining. He's chastising himself. This is an enormous gift to be able to criticize yourself and say, shut up to yourself, rather than have somebody tell you, shut up. So who's he talking to? Do you feel his frustration in this paragraph? Being the emperor is not easy. Being yourself is not easy, is it? Being anyone isn't easy. So the question we should always keep in mind when we analyze these meditations is, who is Marcus Aurelius? Who is this guy? Who are you? One of the most powerful and beautiful classics to help us understand and appreciate Marcus Aurelius is Alice in Wonderland. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that wonderful classic, which, by the way, is on Jimmy's website. If you haven't read it, please read it. It's more than a children's classic, which is covered on this website. Chapter 5 of the novel, Alice Meets the Caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah, pipe, out of his mouth, and he addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. Who are you? Said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. So Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have been changed several times since then. Well, what do you mean by that? Said the caterpillar sternly. Explain yourself. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice, because I'm not myself, you see. I don't see, said the caterpillar. Well, I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, Alice replied very politely, for I can't understand it myself. To begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day, it's very confusing. It isn't, said the caterpillar. Well, perhaps you haven't found so yet, said Alice. But when you have turned into a chrysis, you will someday, you know. And then after that into a butterfly, I should think you'll feel a little queer, won't you? Not a bit, said the caterpillar. Wow. Change. Change is a key, if not the key theme in Marcus Aurelius' writing. He's constantly talking to himself about change, how he changes. It appears everywhere, doesn't it? Do you remember? And as does Marcus' observations about subsequently present, the past, and the future when he thinks about change. Think about change. When you ask yourself, who are you? Who are you? You can begin to understand meditation and its philosophy, whether you call him Stoic or not. Forget about Stoicism for a moment, right? But change. The world changes. You change. if today's AI, you can do shortcuts of your answer, and you can ask AI, is the concept of change important in Stoic philosophy? And you get this. AI tells you this. Yes, the concept of change is very profoundly important. And you can read this on your own if you want. Just put me on pause. I'm not going to read it all. But it is. Change is central to his philosophy, right? It's one of the things that will drive you, if you don't know what Stoicism is, to conclude when you're done reading the meditation, this guy practices Stoicism. That sounds pretty good, but therein lies the difference between AI and us. AI could not weave Alice in Wonderland into the discussion. You understand that? I brought in Alice in Wonderland not only because I read it on this website, but because change is a fundamental, not just Stoic category of philosophy. It's fundamental to life. Ladies and gentlemen, we all change. So reading AI alone, shortcutting, is not going to eliminate the possibility of appreciation. If you read Alice in Wonderland with me, you not only understand change, because Alice changes a lot, right? This is a coming of age novel, Alice in Wonderland. But you have to know what to ask AI. The more you look, the more you see, the more you see, the better you know where to look. This is a fundamental truth about life. One of the laws of life that I've come across is the more you look, the more you see, the more you see, the better you know where to look. Write that down. In classical literature, it happens all the time. So change is where to start understanding what Marcus is thinking about and who he is as an emperor, as a human being. But you don't have to be a Stoic to understand change. It's all around us. Change has always been around us, which the early Greek philosophers realized. Let's review some of what he said about change. Meditation 4, number 43. Time is like a river made up of, this is Marcus writing. Time is like a river made up of events which happen in a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen, it's carried away. And another comes in its place. And this will be carried away too. Meditation 8, 6. The nature of the universal has this work to do, to remove to that place the things which are in this, and to change them, and to take them away hence, and to carry them there, and all things are changed, and we need not fear anything new. All things are familiar, but the distribution of them still remains the same. Number 18. That which has died falls not out of the universe. It stays here. It also changes here. And it's dissolved into its proper parts, which are elements of the universe and of thyself. And these too change, but they don't murmur. They murmur not. Number 5:13. I am composed of formal and the material, and neither of them will perish into non-existence, as neither of them came into existence out of non-existence. Every part of me will be reduced by change into some part of the universe. Remember what I told you when we were reading these things. We are the stuff stars are made of. Carl Sagan, the astronomer. And that, again, will change into another part of the universe. And so on forever. And by consequence of such change, I too exist. And those who begot me, and so on forever in another direction. For nothing hinders us from saying so, even if the universe is administered according to definite periods. I could go on. Every meditation I've read to you has something about change. And you can pick up any 12, and he's going to be thinking about change. And it's central to his thinking. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, is the time you want to make it central to your thinking. Well, Jimmy, I don't want to think about change. Well, that's your right, but that doesn't mean you're not going to change. People hate change, don't they? Oh, if only. You've heard people say that, right? They use that a lot when they talk. Oh, I don't want to change. I want everything to be the same. It can't. People who say that don't understand what they're saying. Nothing stays the same. It never has. The earth moves, the sun moves, we move. Look at the weather and how difficult it is to predict the weather. Don't you laugh at these weathermen sometimes and women? We ourselves change. Our human cells, ladies and gentlemen, regenerate every 7 to 10 years. Did you know that? But that varies too, depending on the cell type. Some cells renew faster. How do you know this, Jimmy? Well, I read it. I happen to believe it because I know that when I get a mosquito bite, my skin blows up, right, around the bite for about a week, and then it changes. It disappears. But it scratches like hell for that week, doesn't it? You see what I'm saying? And others, and what's your skin comprised of? Cells, right? Remaining largely unchanged throughout life. Other cells remain largely unchanged, but they're still different, like your certain brain cells. That's why you want to read with Jimmy. So you can keep your brain stimulated. It's all around us. So why hate it? That's what Marcus is basically saying. Don't be afraid of it. It's part of living. Marcus tells himself these concepts about change over and over and over. Why? Well, maybe he's got to remind himself. Most believe that it was the Greek philosopher Heraclitus that was the first guy to discuss change. When he said his famous line, here's something you should remember and write it down, right? All things are a-flowing. No man ever steps in the same river twice. Think about that. No man, woman, ever steps in the same river twice. All things are flowing. Heraclitus is something Jimmy read many years ago, and it made sense then. So as a concept, Jimmy keeps this in mind. In other words, if everything changes, nothing will last forever, will it? It's changing. That's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it? Jesus, to realize that everything changes. But Marcus figured it out. Look at his discussion on atoms, and I'll explain a little later about gods and God. So change leads Marcus to another concept that's past, present, and future, or time. So if everything is changes, how do we think about time? The concept of time, or the present, blends perfectly with his views on change, because if you can't step into a river in the same place twice, what is the present? Where is the now? What is now? I mean, we're reading this, you're reading with Jimmy now, but what is now? The minute I said now, it's in the past, right? The minute I said right, it's coming up in the future, even though it was in my mind. Can you be in the present? Can you be in the now? If you step into the river now and the river's moving, where do you step? Where did you step? When did you step? Let's talk about time for a minute. I want you to think about this. What is the present? Your judgment of events. You make judgment about things that happen to you. You know, I puked before breakfast. Past, present, and future. This all depends on your position. And your position is changing all the time. So understanding what now is, what's the present, what's now, in relationship to what was and what will be, is very difficult. And if you're confused, that's a good thing. But let me try to give you an example. You see the sun comes up, right, and sets every day. The light from that sun, the sun is a star, it produces light. It takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach the earth. How do you know that, Jimmy? Well, I read about it, but I also could do a mathematical evaluation based on the distance of the sun to the earth. The sun is 93 million miles from the earth, about. Light travels at 186,282 miles per second, which means that if the sun blew up, you wouldn't know it for 8 minutes. Think about this. Think about time. You have a watch. Some of you have, right, an Apple Watch, and time is passing. What does the present mean? What does now mean? When did the sun blow up if you didn't know about it for 8 minutes? Did it blow up 8 minutes ago? Or did it blow up now when you see it blowing up? Besides the sun, the nearest star to Earth is called Proxima Centauri, 4.2 light years away from Earth. What's a light year? Light year is the distance light travels in 1 year, 186,000 miles per second times 60, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot. It's a big number. So the light from that star, once you find it in the sky, it took 4.24 years, 4.25 years to reach us. 4, because it's 24 trillion miles away from us. These are big numbers, but use your imagination. So the light you're looking at that star, find that star and look at that. The light you're looking at left 4 years ago, 4.25 years ago, which means when you're looking at the light now, that star may not be there now, whatever now means. You see what I'm talking about? Marcus Aurelius focused on the present and understanding the present and trying to live in the present. How do you do that? How do you live now? Because we worry about the past. We worry about the future. My kid's got to go to college. I need money. You see? So you're always thinking about something that's going to happen, that might not happen, that did happen. Jimmy was in a car crash, several years ago. And I still think about that car crash sometimes, although I just thought about it now when I was talking to you. I don't think about it every day, although it floats into my mind every now and then. But that was in the past, right? That was in the past, and that's another story. But how do you live in the now? Let's look at some of his observations. Meditation 7. Wipe out the imagination. Stop pulling of the strings. Confine yourself to the present. Understand well what happens either to you or to another, and divide and distribute every object into casual and the material, and think of thy last hour. And let the wrong which is done by a man stay there where the wrong was done. So I titled this when we were reading that meditation, Rules to Live By. Confine yourself to the present. Think about your last hour. We're going to talk about this in a moment. Thinking about death, thy last hour, brings you instantly, ladies and gentlemen, into the now, into the present. Meditation 2. I'm not going to read all this. How quickly all things disappear, but in time the remembrance of them. What is the nature of all sensible things? Blah, 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 blah. All of this is part of the intellectual faculty to observe what death is, and the fact that if a man looks at it in itself, blah, 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 which conduces to the purpose of nature. If anyone is afraid of an observation of nature, he is a child. To observe, too, how man comes nearer to the deity, blah, blah, blah. From Meditation 2. I won't read all this. No man loses any other life than this which he now lives, nor lives any other than this which he now loses. The longest and shortest are thus brought to the same. Do you remember there was a great Western with Robert Duvall and Lonesome Dove? Remember when they were crossing the stream and two young cowboys got caught in the current and they drowned, and Robert Duvall was sitting on his horse talking, and he observed, life is short, shorter for some than for others. That's exactly what this is here. The longest and the shortest are thus brought to the same end. For the present is the same to all. Right? That which is lost appears to be a mere moment. Do you understand? And you can read this on your own. You can pause this recording And then read this carefully for you. For the present is the only thing of which a man is deprived. And it is true that this is the only thing which he has, and that a man cannot lose a thing if he doesn't have it. In other words, the present is the only thing you lose when you die, right? Because you don't have the future and the past is gone, so you're only losing the present. What a brilliant idea about time. Meditation 7. Confine thyself to the present. Right? Is that a double whammy here? Number 7? It is. Look at me. Oh my gosh. I did 2 of the same thing. Let me get rid of this. Number 7, 54. Everywhere and at all times it is in thy power piously to acquiesce in thy present condition and behave justly. Meditation 3. Satisfied with thy present activity. This is how to be happy. If you work at that which is before you, following the right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract you, but keeping thy divine part pure, right? If thou holdest to this, expecting nothing and fearing nothing, but being satisfied with thy present activity, according to nature, thou wilt be happy. You see what I'm saying? You don't think about the future or what could happen, right? Make yourself anxious, frustrated, depressed. Famous guy once just recently said, you want to get out of depression? Work your ass off. That's the truth. Keeping yourself in the present, that's a difficult concept, isn't it? Which is why Marcus reminds himself throughout the meditations repeatedly to focus what's in front of him. And remember, he's doing this because he's the emperor. He's the emperor of Rome. He's got to remind himself. And this is him talking to us. Stay in the moment. Stay in the moment. Staying in the present keeps things in perspective. There was a podcast, and here's the link. You can look it up. It's from the famous Melvin Bragg's In Our Time, which is great. It's a great series, In Our Time. The professors were discussing Marcus Aurelius's meditation. One of the participants reacted to this meditation. When a man kisses his child, said Epictetus, that's one of the philosophers that influenced Marcus a great deal. When a man kisses his child, he should whisper to himself, tomorrow, perchance, thou wilt die. But those are words of a bad omen. There's no word is a word of a bad omen, which expresses any work of nature. In other words, death is natural. Or if it is so, it is also a word of bad omen to speak of the ears of corn being reaped. Well, that's a bad omen when you reap corn. You see what he's saying? Talking about death is not bad. I think it was a woman on this podcast, one of the professors, she just couldn't understand and accept this. Why would you kiss your child and say to yourself, tomorrow you'll die? Why would you do that? Why? Or maybe it's not the child will die, but maybe you will die. Why is that a good or bad thing? She definitely thinks this was not good. She didn't understand why you do that. She said, this is stupid. Is it? Think about it, and there is nothing, ladies and gentlemen, nothing than that possible thought that's going to bring you into the now. When you kiss your child, your loved one, and you say to yourself in your mind, this could be the last time that I kiss her, him, whatever, right? If you say that to yourself, you're in the moment. You're in the now. That's the now. That's the now. Of course, then the now goes into the past, and now you're kissing him again, or kissing her again. But this thought that you will die, it brings you into the moment, and you kiss your child not out of habit. So, bye, dear. Right? How many times have you done that leaving the house? Bye. There's a difference. There's a difference. Death is a concept Marcus deals with throughout the meditation. We're born, we live, we die. We change. While all this goes on, and death, he writes, is just another aspect of change. Nothing to fear. It's just change. It's hard to understand that. And while it's impossible for us in our short analysis to cover everything, these two concepts, change and the present, leads us to understanding why I call this death wish. It's not that he's like Charles Bronson and he has a death wish. He doesn't have a death wish, but he does understand death. And it spreads to all of his thoughts. Jimmy picked two of the very meditations about death. There's many. You can pick up any one and he's going to be talking about death. Why? Because he faces death every day. Every day. He's fighting barbarians. I don't know if I want to read all this, but just a little bit. Do not despise death, but be well content with it. Remember, he's talking to himself. These are rules to himself. He's thinking to himself. Since this too is one of those things which nature wills. Don't despise. I despise them. No, it's just, it's part of nature. It's hard, or is it? For such as it is to be young and grow old and to increase and reach maturity and to have teeth and then a beard and gray hair and to beget, be pregnant and bring forth, blah, 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 blah. Such also is disillusion. This then is consistent with the character of a reflecting man. To be neither careless, nor impatient, nor contemptuous with respect to death, but to wait for it as one of the operations of nature. And as you wait for the time when the child shall come out of the wife's womb, you'll be ready at the time when you're going to fall out of this envelope. There's a footnote here George wrote, but it's really when you die. But if you require also a vulgar kind of comfort, thou wilt be made best reconciled to death by observing the objects from which thou art going to be removed, and the morals of those with whom thy soul will no longer be mingled. For it is in no way right to be offended with men, but it is your duty, as the emperor, to care for them, and to bear with them gently. Thy departure will not be from men who have the same principles as yourself. See, these are wonderful observations about death. They're calming, actually. One more. About death, meditation 7, number 32. Whether it is the dispersion or a resolution into atoms or annihilation. So either you're being dispersed, your atoms, right? Or you're being annihilated. That's it. You're done. It's either extinction or change. How profound is that? Regardless of your religion. Well, Jimmy, I believe when you die, you go to heaven. Whatever you believe, then you're believing it's just change. So why are you afraid? Right? Well, I believe it's extinction. Well, then that's it. You're done, right? Did you lead your life well? Then fine. These observations run throughout because Marcus faced death each and every day. When you face the possibility of dying, it brings reality into focus. It brings the now into focus. I mean, who cares about the past if there is no future? Besides, what is the future? You see what I'm saying? Jimmy, this is a little too deep for me. I was telling this observation to someone the other day, and they looked at me and I don't know if it was confused eyes or calm eyes or expression of like, what the hell are you talking about, Jimmy? But they said, that's deep. Well, I don't know if it's deep, but it's certainly you better think about these things because that's it. You understand that, right? We're all changing. You and I face it every day because you rarely think that now is our last now, right? You don't think that. I think that every morning I get up since I was 17. This is my last now, and here I am still. Strange. His observations about that lead us to conclusions about the shortness of life, the real value of things, the treatment of other men and women. In fact, I would suggest that death is at the core of his entire philosophy. Google the question and see what Google's AI tells you. Marcus views it as neither good nor bad. It's just part of living. And we must never forget he's the emperor. Marcus is writing these concepts down to help him understand not only his role as the emperor, but his role as a human being. So let's face it, death is a scary thing. So how does Marcus deal with fear of death? I'm glad you asked. Fear. Number 9, 21. Termination of activity, cessation from movement, and opinion, and in a sense, their death, isn't evil. Turn your thoughts to consideration of your life. The life as a child, as a youth, thy manhood, thy old age, and for these in every change, there was a death. You moved from this to that, right? You changed. Every change is death. Is this anything to fear? He tells himself. And in a like manner, blah, blah, blah. Number 8. Meditation 7, number 8. Let not future things disturb thee, for thou wilt come to them, if it shall be necessary, having with thee the same reason which now thou usest for present things. Don't fear the future. Number 29. The universal cause is like a winter torrent. We read all this, so I'm not going to read it again. For those who can change men's opinion, and without change of opinions, what else is there than the slavery of men who groan while they pretend to obey? And he gives, simple and modest is the work of philosophy. Draw me not aside to insolence and pride. He's telling himself this. Set thyself in motion, Marcus, if it is in thy power, and do not look about thee to see if anyone will observe it. All motivation is self-motivation. So people call him a Stoic, but his philosophy contains threads that extend well beyond Stoicism. Here's some threads, opinions. One of the very interesting threads in Meditations, in Jimmy's opinion, is his concept of opinions. He basically concludes everything is an opinion, and that our job is to find out the truth within those opinions. A job that today is one of the most important things you can do, right, as you live your life, to sort out the truth. Do you agree? You merely have to think about the world and the messages that we receive each day from the news, social media, our friends. Holy mackerel, do you remember what happened in COVID, right? All those mixed messages we were getting. Grinding your way through these messages to get at the truth is difficult, especially when you factor in change and living in the present. So he continually, Marcus, has to remind himself that everything is just an opinion. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this analysis is Jimmy's opinion. You're right, but it's my opinion. You don't have to believe it. It's my opinion. It's my opinion. I love my opinion. For example, let me give you an example. Does the sun go around the earth, or does the earth go around the sun? Stop there for a moment and think that through. Does the sun go around the earth, or does the earth go around the sun? What do you think? Well, if you've read science and you were brought up and you thought about it, you believe that the earth goes around the sun. But if you're an ancient man, right, and you looked at the sun and you saw it moving across the sky, you would say that the sun is moving and that is in fact going around us, wouldn't you? So that really depends on your position, you see, and your knowledge. You see what I mean about erasing your blackboard? Because quite frankly, it really doesn't matter whether you say it goes around the sun or the sun goes around. You know what I'm saying? That's just an opinion. So I think you can see what he means by opinion, right? But the fact is, two opinions can be true at the same time. Sound travels at 600 miles a second. So if you're 600 miles away from me and there's another guy 600 miles away from me the other way, and they blow up something and the sound reaches me at a certain time, they each heard it differently. You see what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying, right? That things can be true even though they sound that they're not true. So let me review some of what Marcus says about opinions. What opinions has this man? He's saying, think clearly. Whatever man you meet, immediately say to yourself, what opinions has this guy? Good or bad? And if with respect to pleasure and pain and the causes of each with respect, blah, 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 I'll bear that in mind that he is compelled to do so. If you take away thy opinion about that which appears to give you pain, thou thyself standest in perfect security. So what is this self? If you take away your opinion about something that's giving you pain and just say, well, it doesn't give me pain. So what's stopping you from saying that? You understand? Consider that everything is opinion, and that opinion is in thy power. Take away then when thou choosest your opinion, and like a mariner who has doubled the promontory will find calm, everything stable in a waveless bay. Just take it away. Forget your opinion. That's hard to do. I was talking to someone today actually about that and how some people cannot get away from their opinion. They have a strong opinion about something. I won't say what the something is, but it's a strong opinion. And no matter how I try to reason with them, I can't get them to drop that opinion for a moment. They just will not drop that opinion to see the other side. But I can drop mine because, quite frankly, I can argue both sides like a good lawyer, right? What you have to do. Here again, number 7, everything is opinion. Here again, opinion. Everything is opinion. He keeps saying that. Why does he keep saying that? Well, he says it because he continually has to remind himself that whatever somebody's telling him is just their opinion. It's just cast away opinion and you're saved. Who then hinders you from casting it away? I can't tell you how important that meditation is, number 25. That's from number 7. Cast away opinion and you're safe. Who then hinders thee from casting it away? Who stops you from casting away your opinion? You do. Don't you? Well, what if it's the truth? How can I cast away the truth? Well, you should put it aside for a moment because maybe it's not true. Did you ever think of that? No, it's true. I figured it out. Is it? Is it really? Let's talk about that. I figured it out. Well, let's go through logically, and then you can try the Socratic method. Anyway, forget this. Everything is opinion, blah, 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 right? Beautifully, not blah, 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 but everything. And I'm not going to read all this. I'm just telling you, I'm citing these meditations and these numbers for you to take notes and go back and reread them. Because everything is opinion. A man should always have these 2 rules in readiness. The one is to do whatever the reason of the ruling and legislative faculty of reason may suggest for the use of men. And the other is to change your opinion, thy opinion, if there is anyone at hand who sets thee right and moves thee from any opinion. In other words, be open, right? But this change of opinion must proceed only from certain persuasion as of what is just or a common advantage and the like, and not because it appears pleasant or brings reputation. In other words, don't be flattered. Listen to people. So plowing through opinions, his goal is to reach the truth, right? Would you agree with that? That's one of the things he's after. So ultimately, our job is to sort through life and through opinions for the truth. But if everything changes constantly, everything is moving, and oh my God, I got a headache. What is really the truth? Can we handle the truth? Like Jack Nicholson says in you can't handle the truth in the movie A Few Good Men. Well, let's see what Marcus says. Number 9. He who acts unjustly acts impiously. We read this already, right? He is guilty of impiety, guilt. This is a long one, and I'm not going to read this, but I'm going to just read this. And further, the universal nature is named truth. The universal nature is named truth and is the prime cause of all things that are true. So then, he who lies intentionally is guilty of impiety, inasmuch as he acts unjustly by deceiving. And he who lies unintentionally, inasmuch as he is at variance with the universal nature, truth, and inasmuch as he disturbs the order by fighting against the nature of the world, he fights against it who's moved of himself to that which is contrary to the truth. For he has received the powers from nature, through the neglect of which he is not able now to distinguish falsehood from truth. He can't distinguish falsehood from truth. There's a great quote in Dostoevsky. I should have read in this. I should have brought that into this discussion that just came to my mind, Father Zosima. I'll find it, and if you want to email me, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, I'll send it to you. He who pursues pleasure as good and avoids pain as evil is guilty of impiety. Impiety. He who pursues pleasure will not abstain from injustice, etc., etc. With respect to pain, then, and pleasure, or death and life, or honor, blah, 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 which the universal nature, truth, employs equally, whoever is not equally affected is acting impiously. So when you are not following the truth, you are guilty of being impious. Impious. Providence, according to which providence, God, right? Can what is true for me not be true for you? What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Can what is true for me not be true for you? What is the truth? Can what is true for you not be true for me? Is that possible? Color blindness, red and green, light, colorblind, red, green. I'm red, green, colorblind. I can't see red. I can't see green. I can only estimate what I think you're seeing if you're not colorblind. So I'm color. I never see red or green. So you can hit me over the head and say, this is red, damn it. I would not know what the hell you're talking about. I wouldn't know because I can't see it. Right? So what do you see, Jimmy? I can't tell you what I see because I don't have a reference point to tell you what you see. I don't have a commonality. So I have to trust you when you say, when we're driving and there's a blinking light, and I ask my wife, what color is that blinking light? And she tells me it's yellow or red or green. I have to believe her. Well, Jimmy, can't you see yellow? I can see yellow, but when it's just blinking, the yellow could be red. And I'm just not sure. I don't want to make a mistake when I'm driving. You know why, right? So only you can decide what is true or not. And when you examine opinions, sometimes you're going to believe an opinion that happens to turn out not to be true. Have you ever done that? I've done that. I've done that, where I believe something to be true, and then I subsequently find out it's not true. That's a rude awakening, isn't it? Right? George called his practical moralism. I don't think George was right. I don't think he's a practical moralist. I think he's trying to search for the truth, which brings me to the final discussion closely of God, gods, and providence. When you're thinking about what is true from what is opinion, I think it's important to discuss what Marcus says about gods, God, providence, because he uses these terms interchangeably. Here's a few instances. Meditation 9, number 4. Either the gods have no power or they have power. If they have no power, why do I pray to them? If they have power, why dost thou pray for them to give thee the faculty of not fearing of any of the things which thou fearest? But perhaps thou wilt say that the gods have placed them in thy power. Well, then, is it not better to use what is in your power like a free man than to desire in a slavish and abject way what is not in your power? This whole section, he's thinking about gods and God, right? Either the gods, lowercase gods, because Romans believed in many, many gods. Meditation 12, capital G, God, singular. God sees the minds of all men, barred of the material vesture and rind of impurities. I don't know about you, but I can't think of a more Christian thought. And this guy's not necessarily a Christian. He's just an emperor, right? God sees the minds of all men, barred. Well, Jimmy, isn't this a translation? Could George be making a mistake? I don't think so. He could be, but I don't think so. He's very careful as a translator. For with his intellectual part alone, he touches the intelligence only which is flow, etc. And if thou usest thyself to do this, thou wilt rid thyself of much trouble. Number 5. How can it be? Now you see here, number 2, 12:2, it's singular. In 12:5, it's back to plural, but lowercase, gods. How can it be that the gods, having arranged all things well and benevolently for mankind, have overlooked this alone, that some men, some very good men, and men who, as we may say, have had the most communion with the divinity, and through pious acts and religious observances have been most intimate with divinity, when they have once died, should never exist again, but should be completely extinguished? How could that be? How could that be? But if this is so, be assured that if it ought to have been otherwise, the gods would have done it. You see how he argues with himself about the existence of God, God's providence? Should not dispute with the gods. Right? Number 11, what a power man has to do nothing except what God will approve, and to accept all that God may give him. Powerful. Powerful. Meditation 8:23. Does anything happen to me? I receive it and refer it to the gods. Am I doing anything? You see how he chastises himself? Am I doing anything? I do it with reference to the good of mankind. Does anything happen to me? I receive it and refer it to the gods and the source of all things, from which all things happen and derive. You see, he talks to himself. Isn't that beautiful? Live with the gods. To the gods I am indebted for having good grandfathers, good parents. This is from his first meditation when he was giving credit to everybody, right? To the gods I am indebted for having good grandfathers, etc., etc. And he goes on and on. What do you think? Finally, meditation 11, number 18. This is one of the most important meditations in Jimmy's opinion that he wrote. It spells out the essence of his philosophy in 9 observations, and I would like to review them. I'm not going to read the original. You can read that on your own and go back. But just don't forget, he's the emperor. And we're almost done, ladies and gentlemen. Stick with me. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Oh, that's good coffee. It's cold, but it's good. If you're offended, consider what is your relationship to men, quote, and that we are made for one another. You see that? That's one of the most common references that he'll see. We're made for one another. And then examine the matter using your reason and the natural order of things. So if you're ever offended, consider what is your relationship to men. He's the emperor, right? That he's made for another. So don't just jump to conclusion. Don't whack off his head. Think about this and examine the matter using your reason and the natural order of things. Isn't that a good law? Second, look at the individuals you're dealing with. What are their opinions? Consider with what pride that they do what they do. If you're doing right, don't be displeased. But if you're not right, then do so involuntary. They do so involuntary and in ignorance. If they are doing right, don't be displeased with them. But if not right, if they're doing something bad, they're probably doing it involuntary and because they're ignorant. He doesn't believe that there's evil all the time. A lot of times he thinks that people are just misguided. I love this one. Consider that you yourself have done many things wrong, even if you abstain from certain faults. Isn't that true? Consider you don't understand whether they are doing wrong. Don't forget he's the emperor, is judging people. Consider you don't understand whether they are doing wrong because you don't know the circumstances. And a man must learn a great deal to enable him to pass a correct judgment on another man's acts. Judge not, lest thou be judged, right? Consider when you are mad or grieved, life is only a moment, and after a short time, we're all dead. Sorry. Consider when you're mad. Life is only a moment, and after a short time, we're all dead. I just admire this guy a lot. Consider it's not men's acts that disturb you, which have their foundation in men's ruling principles, but your own opinions, which disturb us. Get rid of your opinions and dismiss your judgment about the act and reflect that no wrongful act of another brings shame on you, right? Consider how much more pain we feel by getting angry or vexed by men's acts than perhaps the acts themselves. Isn't that the truth? I had a good friend who passed away. He was just a gem of a guy, one of our great advocates in business. And he passed away. He died. And he had a great funeral. I spoke at the funeral. A lot of the salespeople were there from around the country because he had this great reputation. He worked for the company for many years. And after the funeral, the following week, I visited with the president. And he was a young man, he's taking the reins from his dad. And he started going off about this guy. Yeah, he did this son of a, he's swearing left and right. This bad. Because the guy who died was the director of national sales. He wrote contracts with various companies for distributing the company's products. But he kept contracts, but he didn't keep accurate, record. He didn't write stuff down all the time. Kept it in his head. He was a brilliant guy, just absolutely brilliant. Even the father president used to call him a gem in the rough, which is a compliment because he came in from the factory floor into the management positions. But this kid was just raging. Oh, you son of a, just swearing like a trooper, like a sailor. And I'm standing there listening to this guy rage over this wonderful man who he himself said he loved, right? Gave him credit for a lot of things. And now suddenly, now that the guy's dead, he's yelling, ripping him a new one left and right, right? So he didn't read Marcus Aurelius because after he was done talking, I basically said, "Are you done?" And he's sweating. He's so pissed off. He's sweating. And I said calmly, "Are you done?" And then I let him have it. I said, "What are you talking about? Are you talking about the guy we just put in the ground? The guy who did this and that?" And I gave him specifics about what he did. The guy was a genius, a beautiful man. And he's just huffing and puffing and putting his head down finally in shame because it was ridiculous. How much more pain we feel by getting angry or vexed than, by men's acts than perhaps the acts themselves. There was nothing to get mad about this guy's work, his life. He left the company in perfect condition. Perfect. I don't know. Consider a good disposition is invincible if it is genuine. Isn't that the truth? What will be the most violent to do if you continue to be kind toward him? And if he's always talking about people because he's the emperor, right? And if the opportunity arises, gently admonish him and correct his errors. But don't do any double meanings like, my child. Don't talk to him like a kid. Just bring him to light. Help him understand the error of his ways. These 9 rules are a gift from the muses, the gods. To be moved by passion isn't manly. To be moved by passion is not manly. Mildness and gentleness are more manly. Anybody can get pissed off, right? But mildness and gentleness are more manly. And he who possesses these qualities possesses strength, nerves, and courage, and not the man subject to the fits of passion and discontent. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that, when you see someone lose their temper, just think about this. Think about this. It is madness to expect bad men not to do wrong. Can you tell me that that's not true? It's madness to expect bad men not to do wrong. Of course they're going to do wrong. So if you expect this, you expect the impossible. Allowing men to behave so to others and expect them not to do you any wrong, allowing men to behave so, doing wrong to others, and expect them not to do you any wrong is irrational and tyrannical. You see what I'm saying? Imagine if you lived like this. Imagine if you lived like this. Imagine if we all lived like this. Point of view, just a couple of more things. Point of view is everything. Virtue. When you're offended with any man's shameless conduct, ask yourself, is it possible that shameless men should not be in the world? Right? It's not possible. So do not then require what is impossible. You see a jerk acting like a jerk, right? Can a fig tree not produce figs? Oh my God. Oh my God. What thou wilt find is no one among them, blah, blah, blah. A man who has not been instructed does the acts of an uninstructed man. Consider where, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Okay. Man is formed by nature to acts of benevolence, and when he has done anything benevolent or in any other way conducive to the commonest interest, he has acted conformably to his constitution, and he gets what is his own. You reap what you sow. Is Marcus a Stoic? Who was this man who wrote Meditations? If reading classical literature helps us to see how others lead their lives and how we should lead ours, meditation is the perfect piece of literature. It's a diary. It's a person talking to himself, about life, about his duty as the emperor and how we should treat our fellow human beings. I thought of one word that sums up my feelings about these 12 meditations, and that word is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And I would like to thank you for listening and reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy. And you've been reading with Jimmy. And this has been my analysis, Death Wish, of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. I hope you enjoyed it. Please reread them again with Jimmy or watch our videos on this website and visit and read other classics. We're here for you. We enjoy doing this. We're getting more and more emails, which means more and more people are reading. I'm so grateful. We're going to be tackling other classics very soon, if they're not already. I don't want to tell you where we're at because I want you to come back. But some of them that are already there, I think you'll enjoy. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great life.